Gonna pawn your war stories too, Grandpa. That's what one of the clerks smirked as I laid a dusty duffel bag on the counter. They laughed when they saw what was inside a folded flag, a pair of dog tags and a weathered silver star. I didn't say a word, but then tires screeched outside. Diesel engines roared. A full military convoy blocked the lot. A uniformed officer stepped in, saw the medal, saw me, and snapped to attention. Comment respect. If you believe some honors should never be priced, I hadn't been in a pawn shop in years. Never had much need for them. A lifetime of military service leaves you with memories, not possessions. Things that matter can't be bought or sold. Or so I thought until that morning. It wasn't about money, not really. It was about memory and meaning. About finding the right place for things that deserve better than gathering dust in my small apartment. Things that deserve to be remembered when I no longer could. I carried an old green duffel bag, the same one I'd had since 1968, its canvas worn soft with time and wear. Inside, my ceremonial flag folded with precision into its triangle by young soldiers who hadn't yet seen what I had. My dog tags still stained with desert sand, and the silver star I'd never displayed, never talked about, never polished for show. The pawn shop sat between a liquor store and a laundromat, its windows plastered with neon signs advertising instant cash and no questions asked. Perfect anonymity. That's what I wanted. Somewhere these things would be safe. Catalog preserved, not displayed in my name. Just kept intact after I was gone. The door chimed softly as I entered, the smell of dust and electronics mixing with cheap air freshener. Two young clerks looked up from their phones, then looked at each other with the silent communication of those accustomed to sizing up desperate people and their desperate offerings. One muttered to the other just loud enough for me to hear, "Looks like we got another donation from the time capsule." I said nothing, just walked to the counter with the measured pace I'd maintained since shrapnel took part of my right hip near Da Nang. Set the duffel down carefully like it contained something fragile. In a way it did. "Looking to sell?" the taller one asked, not bothering to hide his boredom. "Or just showing off your attic collection?" I unzipped the bag, the familiar sound taking me back to countless field operations, to quiet nights when that zipper meant safety or movement or danger. They saw the items as I laid them out with care. The silver star in its worn case, the meticulously folded flag, the dog tags that had once carried my blood type and religious preference, Protestant. Not that I'd believed in much after the first tour, and they laughed, actually laughed. "You serious? You want cash for this nostalgia box?" The second clerk, younger with a sleeve of tattoos, smirked as he picked up the flag, with casual disregard for what it represented. "How much you expecting, Grandpa? These military trinkets aren't exactly high demand. We get Vietnam stuff all the time." I didn't respond. Wasn't there to explain myself or convince them of anything. Words had never been my strong suit anyway. Action was what mattered in my world, and silence was often the strongest action of all. I just stood still, the same way I'd stood on the battlefields, and in hospitals and at too many funerals. Still and steady, because sometimes that's all a man can offer. The taller clerk prodded the silver star with his finger, leaving a smudge on the tarnished metal. "This real or one of those replicas they sell online?" The younger one snickered. "Probably as real as his war stories. Next he'll tell us he saved Private Ryan." They thought I couldn't hear, or maybe they didn't care if I did. To them I was just another old man trying to squeeze value from relics of a forgotten time. Another transaction in a day full of desperate people and used merchandise. But I wasn't there for their validation, wasn't there for their respect. I was there because sometimes memories become too heavy to carry alone. As they continued their quiet mockery, the taller clerk reached for the silver star, picking it up and turning it over carelessly in his hands. "Not authenticated," he said with the false expertise of someone who'd watched too many reality TV shows about valuable antiques. "Can't offer much without papers." I gently but firmly took it back from him. "Not for sale," I said, my voice rough from years of disuse. "Just for safekeeping." It was the first thing I'd said since entering their shop. My words seemed to surprise them, as if they'd expected me to haggle or plead or launch into some elaborate war story to justify the metal's worth. "Safekeeping?" The younger clerk raised an eyebrow. "This isn't a storage facility. We buy and sell. That's it." I nodded, understood their business model perfectly well. But sometimes places serve purposes beyond their intended function. Sometimes a pawn shop could be more than a pawn shop. I'd chosen this place specifically because of the military memorabilia and their window tokens of service from other veterans who'd passed through. I was about to explain when the bell above the door chimed again, but this time it was accompanied by the unmistakable sound of boots on the tile floor. Not casual footwear, but the measured, synchronized steps of trained personnel. First came the boots, then the uniforms, then the sound of multiple diesel engines idling outside in the parking lot, their deep rumble vibrating through the windows. Everyone in the shop turned toward the door. The clerk's expressions shifted from contempt to confusion. Through the glass storefront we could see that a convoy had arrived. 6 military vehicles with official markings, armed escorts standing at attention beside them, a full formal formation in the small parking lot of this unremarkable pawn shop on the edge of town. A man in marine dress blues stepped inside. His uniform was impeccable, silver oak leaves gleaming on his collar, combat ribbons telling a story of service across multiple conflicts. His posture conveyed authority without effort, the natural command presence of someone accustomed to responsibility. He scanned the room with practiced efficiency, threat assessment, old habit, and when his eyes found me, he stopped cold. Recognition, immediate and absolute. Then in front of everyone he rendered a perfect salute, not casual or performative, but the real thing, sharp, precise, respectful. Sergeant Major Raymond Hale. His voice carried clearly through the suddenly silent shop. "Sir, we've been looking for you." The clerks turned pale. The objects in front of them suddenly transformed from trinkets to something else entirely. Something real. Something earned. "Wait." The younger one couldn't even finish his sentence. The officer turned to them, his expression neutral but his eyes hard. "That medal was issued after Operation Iron Passage, classified until 2010. The man who earned it saved 14 lives, including mine, under conditions I'm still not at liberty to fully discuss. No more jokes, no more noise. Just the heavy silence of realization and regret. We were told someone matching your description brought these items here." The officer continued addressing me directly. "Didn't expect to find you yourself, sir. When the local Veterans Affairs office got word, they contacted us immediately." I nodded slowly. Should have known better than to think I could deposit these items quietly. Some things refuse to be forgotten, no matter how much we might wish. I picked up the flag still folded in its precise triangle and handed it to him. Not dramatically, not with speech or ceremony, just a simple transfer of something precious from one guardian to another. Thought it belonged somewhere safer now. I said simply, somewhere it would be remembered properly. He accepted it with the reverence it deserved, holding it carefully against his chest. "With us, sir, always. These items belong in the memorial at Quantico, along with the story of the man who earned them." The clerk stood motionless behind the counter, their earlier smugness replaced by something between shame and awe. Through the window, more uniformed personnel waited at attention, a guard of honor for items they couldn't even see. "We didn't know," the taller clerk finally managed. The officer didn't even look at him as he replied, "That's the problem, isn't it? Too many don't know, too many don't bother to learn." I gathered the remaining items, returning them to the duffel bag with the same care I'd always shown them. Not my burden to carry anymore, not my story to protect. Some truths emerge, whether we invite them or not. If you believe forgotten, heroes deserve more than dust and silence. Subscribe to Steelheart's stories. I never planned to be remembered, never sought recognition beyond the quiet nod of fellow veterans who recognized the 1,000-yard stare we all carried home. But within days of that morning at the pawn shop, word spread through channels I'd long forgotten existed. The veteran community has its own network, invisible to most but startlingly efficient when activated. The first sign came when flowers appeared on my apartment doorstep. No note, no name, just a simple arrangement of red, white, and blue blooms. Then came letters from soldiers I'd served with decades ago, from families of men I'd pulled from burning vehicles, from young Marines who'd studied Operation Iron Passage in their tactical training. The pawn shop itself transformed almost overnight. The garish neon signs disappeared from the windows, replaced by a simple American flag and a discreet display honoring local veterans. It became something else entirely, a place where service was respected again, where military items were handled with reverence rather than priced by the grand. The clerks who had mocked me never returned to work. I heard through the grapevine that the younger one had enlisted, driven by shame or inspiration or some combination of both. The owner said they'd resigned the same day, unable to face what they'd done. That same owner, a heavy-set man named Davis who'd bought the place after returning from Iraq in '91, reached out to me personally. He arrived at my door with coffee and apologies, offered to rename the storefront after my battalion to create a permanent display honoring Operation Iron Passage. I declined. Some memories aren't meant for public consumption, some honors too personal for commercial display. What mattered came later in quieter moments that never made the local news or social media feeds. A group of young cadets from the nearby military academy visited me at home one evening, bringing with them the items I'd surrendered at the pawn shop, but they were different now. Professionally cleaned, carefully mounted in a custom display case with museum-quality preservation materials.